Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome to day 74 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today's commentary and reading covers Deuteronomy chapter 10 through chapter 12. I do want to back up, though, and start at chapter 9, in particular verse 6, as we set out today. The Lord's reminding the people this is His land. He's giving it to them for them to dwell in, but it still belongs to Him. And He is telling them of the victories that they will have, but not to boast, because He's the one that's giving them the victory. So He again mentions the Anakim, the giants that are in the land, and He's assuring the people He will give them the victory in their battles, but they must fight them the way that He has called them to fight. In our life as believers, there are many battles before us, but we need to trust the Lord as we move forward in these. I'm not meaning some name it and claim it or prosperity gospel. That's not what I mean. But don't stay in the wilderness. Move forward. Take hold of the promises that He has given you, that He will never leave you, He will never forsake you. That should be a freeing promise that the Lord's given you. Move forward, take hold of that. That we're not to be anxious. Do not be anxious for anything, but in everything, through prayer and petition and through thanksgiving. Trust the Lord. Trust that He will take care of you. I know it can be very difficult at times, but trust Him. We're going to look at a couple of verses here with that. In Deuteronomy chapter 9 verse 6, He says, "Know then, it is not because of your righteousness that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stubborn people. Remember, do not forget how you provoked the Lord your God to wrath in the wilderness, from the day that you left the land of Egypt until you arrived at this place. You have been rebellious against the Lord." Now, I know it's easy for us to just apply this to the Hebrew people and say, wow, they really caused Moses and Aaron a lot of problems when they were in the wilderness. And they could have just had a short journey from Egypt to the promised land and been in there and already occupying the land, but they didn't trust God. We can look to the Hebrew people and put all of that on them, but I see believers that do this every day. I've been guilty of it myself, where at times we just don't trust that the Lord's going to work for us, that the Lord's already done the work for us. And it's telling us to what? That it's not because of our righteousness. I want to look at two verses in particular out of the New Testament scriptures. Ephesians chapter 2, and we're going to look at verse 8 and 9. "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not as a result of works, so that no one may boast." Now, I know the so that no one will boast part a lot of times becomes the bigger part when somebody looks at this verse, but it's not a result of works, of your works. You're not earning your salvation. Your salvation is a gift of God, a free gift, not a gift that you had to work for. But we do have to reach out to take hold of the promises that God has for us. The salvation is done once and for all when you take His blood upon the doorpost of your heart. That's been sealed. But what about the works? Well, let's look at this. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 10. "For by the grace of God I am what I am, and that His grace towards me did not prove vain. But I labored even more than all of them. Yet not I, but the grace of God with me." In other words, if I do anything good, it's not me. It's God working through me. On my own I can do no good. It is the grace and works of the Lord coming through my life. There are so many still to this day that hold to this concept that they are working for their salvation or working to keep their salvation. But our salvation is a gift of God. And God's not one who gives a gift and yanks it back. But here's the picture. Imagine the most beautiful looking gift wrapped present you could ever imagine and see. And when someone gives that to you, you say, this gift is so beautiful and so pretty, I don't even want to tear the paper. I'm going to sit it up here on my shelf and I'm going to look at it, and I'm just going to take just wonderment in how beautiful this wrapping is and the bow on top. Well, you don't even know what's inside of it. And if it was that pretty and exquisite on the outside, imagine what it's like on the inside. Imagine what the gift is. And that's where so many people place their salvation. They put it on the shelf and they don't go deeper. And there are the deeper things of God which He wants you to take hold of. And the Hebrew people, had they have walked into the promised land, walking in victory from day one, knowing that every battle that is going to be before them would be victorious because the Lord was God. All we have to do is keep in step with Him. Wow, what would things have looked like? Now we know that it doesn't go that way. There are times that it does. There's battles that they go into that it is like the enemy just falls right almost to their feet. We could even look another time, and we're going to come to it, when King Jehoshaphat and the Hebrew people go out singing as the enemy is approaching them. And when they get to the battlefield, all the enemy's dead. Because they trusted the Lord and they marched out singing praises to Him, and they're wiped out. That's the victory that God will give us if you trust Him, if you take steps following Him. And then when we get to chapter 10, which was our main reading today, the Lord's going to lay out again for the people about the 10 Commandments and how they were given, how they are placed inside the ark. Moses talks about his time on the mountain with the Lord. But then in verse 12 of chapter 10, now Israel, what does the Lord your God require from you? But to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all His ways and love Him, and serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Are you serving Him with all your heart and with all your soul? Are you serving the Lord freely? Again, this is this concept of, as I say, when I'm saying, are you serving Him freely? It's not that you're serving Him feeling like you're going to get anything out of it. The only thing we get out of it is by being in the will of God. When I serve the Lord, I know that I'm not getting anything really in return other than just the pleasure of being able to serve Him and to be with Him. Verse 13, and keep the Lord's commandments and His statutes, which I am commanding you today for your good. For your good. The law of God, His teachings are for your good. They're to help you. Again, if we follow the Lord's word, how much more awesome would our life be in Him? And we get to take the glory of the promises of God. We get to experience that. We have an advantage that the great patriarchs didn't have, and that's that our sacrifice has been done once and for all. Christ shed His blood on the cross, and that was it, the final sacrifice. Even the greatest of the patriarchs, Abraham, still had to continue to bring a regular sacrifice before the Lord to make atonement for his sins. And what if he didn't do one of those sacrifices right? You see, we don't have that burden anymore because that's been paid for. It's been covered. In chapter 11, it's going to remind the people of the rebellion that had taken place. An interesting thing is here, though, there's a name missing, and that's the name of the ringleader of the rebellion. Korah's name is missing. Why? We're not really given a very clear reason as to why his name's not there. All I can think of in one sense on my part of just reading this is maybe Dathan and Abiram, maybe there was people there that were more connected with them, and so that could be pointed out clearer. Because we're going to hear Korah's name mentioned even in the New Covenant Scriptures to remind people not to rebel against the Lord and not to rebel against your leaders, but to follow them. He's going to remind the people in verse 10 of chapter 11, for the land into which you are entering to possess is not like the land of Egypt from which you came, where you used to sow your seed and water it with your foot like a vegetable garden. You say, water it with your foot? What does this mean? Like people carrying around watering cans? Well, that could be one part. But if you've ever seen before in Egypt, if you've ever seen like a satellite photo of Egypt, it is a barren wasteland except for the land that was around the Nile River. Because Egypt gets less than 2 inches of rain a year, whole country. Most of it is watered purely by the Nile. And in ancient times, and I've even seen some in modern times, they had a little trough that, like a water wheel, that the people would walk on, either inside of it or walk on a little pedal, like a bicycle type pedal on the side, and it would take pictures and dip an empty pitcher down into the water and spin it up and pour it out into their little canals that they had made to water with. But in the land which the Lord's taking them in, it is going to be rain. I know you sometimes think of Israel as just being desert as well, but there's very, very much lush green area. And even today now the desert is blooming again because of irrigation that's been brought to the land. But the Lord's assuring the people this is going to be a different place because the Lord has blessed the land that you're going to dwell in. And as you serve Him, as you follow Him, He's going to continue to bless you. It's not on the works. It is on you following what the Lord's already laid out before you. He's also telling the people that if they stay in worshiping these false gods and not following His precepts, that it will shut the sky up and that it won't rain. And you think later when we get into King Ahab and Jezebel, when the people are worshiping Baal and the prophets are leading the people astray, what does the Lord do? He shuts the sky up and denies water to the people. So you will see the Lord's words follow through in Scripture. And then I want to just end out in chapter 12 today. And I know I've gone a little long. Please bear with me. He is now telling the people their instruction that when they cross the Jordan and live in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, and He gives you rest from all your enemies around you, so that you will live in security, then it shall come about that the place in which the Lord your God will choose for His name to dwell, there you shall bring all that I commanded you. And He's then going to tell them to bring their burnt offerings, to bring their gifts and offerings. But He warns them, don't make sacrifices in the places that the Canaanites did. Don't go to the high place and use their abandoned altars. Tear those altars down. Tear their gods down. And then you will enjoy the fullness of what God has for you. Tear down the altar in your own life and enjoy the fullness that the Lord has for you today. Brothers and sisters, I do hope that you've had a good day. Until tomorrow, God bless.